Welcome to the Customer First Show, putting customers at the heart of your business.
Hi, so welcome to this latest episode of the Customer First Show. Today, I've got a special guest all the way from sunny Milton Keynes. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi Naeem, thank you for having me. It's not very sunny here today, I have to say. I'm out in my summer house, which is my office, and it's very novel because not only do I get all the storms when I'm trying to do a Zoom call, thankfully it's just a bit rainy so it's fine, but I also get squirrels on the roof and lovely things like that. But yeah, it's not especially sunny, but yes, I'm here in Milton Keynes, in the UK. So I'm the CXO for MKL Innovation, who are an IoT house up in Yorkshire. I'm doing a MBA at Cranfield Uni, which I have to say has been my absolute dream. I've always wanted to go to uni, so to be finally doing that now at this later stage in life, I'm absolutely loving it. I'm a CCXP. I'm very passionate about ensuring that the customer is centered around the business right from the start and then really focused full end to end. I'm also a tech geek, which you probably see in the chapter. That's all spacey and a bit techy. And so working in a tech startup is right up my street. I also have a consultancy business called Canoodle CX, and that keeps me out of mischief. I'm mainly creating strategies and then delivering the projects to deliver the strategies for a varied number of sectors. But I think my real achievement for this year so far, which I've got to get this in, is definitely collaborating in the customer experience 2 book. That's definitely a bucket list event for me, and I just can't wait for it to be published.
Yeah, brilliant. And all these things, you said a few things there. It just speaks about the depth of your experience, really, isn't it? I mean, you've done quite a few things. You've worked in a few different industries, and there is definitely a depth of experience there. Is there something that you'd really lean to in that experience that you think this is what makes Sharon?
I guess being able, because I've been in such a varied number of sectors, so aviation and retail and hospitality and IT and telecoms, that has really set me up so that next time I go in somewhere new, I have all of this kind of experience that I can pull out from different sectors, which is so helpful to have that kind of broad experience and gives me different perspectives, I think, which can be quite useful to a client. And certainly I love the variation of that and being able to see lots of different types of customers, whether it's a passenger or an end user for a bit of software. They can be completely different, but they're still the customer at the end, and I love that different variation and getting in front of them and seeing how they tick and what they need. So yeah, I think the variation piece has been great for me to bring that real different perspectives to the table.
Yeah, very good, very good. And the reality is, as you've just said, you've worked in a couple of different industries, or a number of different industries, and I guess there's learnings you can bring from each to the other. Sometimes you go and work with a client and all they've ever done is they've only ever spoken to other people in the same sector. But do you find that, your experience from different sectors, you can cross learn and cross apply those principles?
Definitely. I mean, what I'm doing at the moment for MKL, so yes, I'm running all their customer experience side, but because I've got a strong IT background as well, I'm able to then look at their cyber security and put myself in a customer's shoes and think, right, one of the biggest concerns for a customer with an IoT house or an IoT solution is the security side. So if I can grab hold of that security side of the cyber and make sure we're all certified and everything is really locked down, I know that we are well protected and we are ticking a massive box from the customer point of view. So that kind of being able to bring that from my background, but still tick the CX box at the same time is really quite a useful place to be. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to that then. So, from that point of view, what are the 2, 3, 4, fundamental principles that Sharon brings to a new client, to a project you're working on? What are those things? Could you give us a couple of examples maybe of the kind of things where you'll really excel at?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably really building the foundation, the backbone of CX for a new client. So really building that CX strategy right from the start, taking a bit of time to get it right. And then once you've got it, really tailoring it to the organization, making it very authentic, using the language that is used inside that organization. Not, I mean, it's easy to pick one up off the shelf or pick one out of a book, but your customers and your employees and your leaders are just going to smell that out very quickly, and it's just not going to live. So I think for me, getting under the skin of the organization, working out what their culture is, what's important to them, and then building a CX strategy and a framework to deliver the strategy around that, that's very tailored and really speaks about that organization. And then just helping them bring it to life, making sure they don't stuff it in a drawer, keep refreshing it, and then helping them understand and see the value of it, and that it can be a really useful tool, and helping them flex if they need it. So yeah, I guess the strategy side is one of the things that I do really love to make sure is really built in from the start.
I want to pick on something you said there. So bringing it to life, you know, you do often see people who do a piece of work, a strategy piece of work, you know, they talk about customer experience, but they're doing it because they want to spend some money or tick a box maybe. You know, you come across that a lot in your time?
Oh, definitely. I think that's where it can fall down. If someone is just doing CX from a tick box point of view, seeing it as something fluffy, oh, we've got to think about the customer, and it's a bit of a tag on rather than the real fundamental, then they really don't get the value of it. And it's, you often see the kind of the raised eyebrows and the roll of the eyes when you're thinking, when you sort of mention customers, and what does the customers say about this, and have you asked the customer, and who are your customers? You kind of get the so once you spot that, it's then the time to go, okay, well, right, let's kind of step back a bit. What's the why are you actually doing this? And you often hear kind of cash is king, and it's kind of reminding customers, companies, well, great, yeah, of course the cash is king, but who brings the cash? And getting them to switch from that bottom line focus and pure KPIs and profit driven to, actually, if we really focus on the customer and what the customer would like to buy and what the customer would like to receive and how they'd like their service delivered, the bottom line will take care of itself. And that's sometimes quite a hard sell, but once you can flick that switch for somebody, it's great to see, because once they get it, they really do get it. And I've seen that firsthand. It's amazing to see, but it can take a little bit of a while, a little bit of a journey sometimes to go from that stage of CX to CX. So yeah, that journey is an important piece to make sure it's there right from the top.
Yeah, so you know, CX, everyone's talking about CX at the moment because they feel it's a new thing, but it's not, is it? I mean,
No.
You just described a bunch of stuff which people should be doing all the time anyway. I mean, you work in the tech space, so something simple like, you know, thinking about the user interface of a piece of technology, I guess that's something you've done a lot. Now we label it as CX, but it's a principle, isn't it? It's something you've probably been doing for a while. Is that fairly true?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think in the tech world, that's where you can really set yourself apart. If you have really focused what you deliver around the customer and built your product around them, if you thought about where they are going to click next and where they might naturally click, because if you get that click wrong, they might click out of the box and go into somewhere else. Or if you thought about actually what happens when they log in, is it intuitive? You're going to save yourself pain in the long run, because if it's not easy to use, if it's not designed around the customer, you then end up getting all the service calls or dropouts, and then you've got more pain for both the customer and yourself. So creating everything, certainly in around a technical product, around your customer, can just really bring some huge benefits and ultimately make your product a lot more saleable. I think that can sometimes not always be at the forefront of tech companies' minds. It's very easy to just build something and go, right, what are my competitors doing? Their software looks fancy, I'm going to go and do that. But actually what the customer wants is something that is working all the time, barely any downtime. It is very easy to use and accessible, and sending alerts direct to their phone or whatever it is they need to fit into their real life, rather than something that just looks amazing but doesn't really give them what they need. So it is really that focus that I've had to make sure is really embedded into certainly what we do at MKL. It really is there from the start, and same with other products and projects we've done in the past. That piece around, especially if you've got a back end developer person, reminding them that everything they do touches that customer, even if they never see that customer. It's so important for them to see that connection, that there's going to be an end user touching and feeling it and using it in their daily life. So you can't just stuff a bit of code in, head down with your headphones on. It's really important to think about that end user.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got plenty of those horror stories myself. If we started talking about them, we'd be here all day. Just what you were saying there. One of the stories I like, one of the big pieces of innovation and kit I like, is what Argos have done, you know, with their click and collect. And it sounds so easy, but you can check stocks available, click and collect, you know, because I want something, I want it now. I don't want to wait in a queue when I get there. And also I don't want to, you know, go somewhere and they say it's not at this store, it's at the next store. Yes. I think you had some involvement in some work at Argos. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your time at Argos, maybe?
Yeah, I absolutely loved working at Argos. I was involved in the digital transformation there. That was one of my programs. One of my particular favourites of the projects was looking at the optimization of a proposition called Hub to Home. And that's all about, instead of waiting for 2-3 days, 2 weeks for for products to come from their main depots, the new model would be to come from your local store or your local satellite store. And that meant that we were able to switch completely the way that customers were served. So then you could get something almost immediately. I mean, it is literally, you can pay, I think it's $3.95 still, but you would get it within the hour, or book a slot, hourly slots, and almost get it straight away. And working through that project and that proposition was really great for me, because I had the real option to really immerse myself in that process from a colleague point of view. I mean,
just explain what immerse means, because you know, obviously I'm used to the topic, the phrase, but just tell us what immerse means quickly.
Yeah, so I'm for me, because I was in the headquarters, I could easily have sat there and called people in and set focus meetings and said, how does this process run? How should it run? How does it actually run, etc. But first of all, the front end teams are crazy busy, and I knew that was not going to be particularly valuable to them. But also I knew I probably wouldn't get actually, how does it really work for this brand new proposition? So I had the opportunity to train as a delivery driver. So the 22-foot Sprinter vans, which were absolutely massive for a little one like me, and to wear the uniform. I had to do a 2-hour assessment to make sure I was safe to drive the vans. And then I followed the whole process through, from picking all the goods from inside the store to packing my vans, doing all my safety checks, and then did my very first delivery, which was actually to the prison in Milton Keynes, which was a bit weird as the very first delivery. But actually to go and directly to a customer's door and to meet them kind of whites of the eyes and see the joy of them getting the package so quickly and testing out the new proposition and seeing their feedback direct, or kind of handing something over and then going, this is great this time, but last time it wasn't so good because of this. Wow. Was really great, especially when you were picking up returns, because the end process then would be to unpack my van, go back to the store, do all the paperwork that's needed, understand that from an employee point of view and what that feels like, and how we can remove some of those pain points for an employee and the customer, and then make sure everything is then put away again. So that whole process end to end, experiencing that and being immersed in that was so valuable, and is definitely something that I think for me is important if I'm trying to understand what our front line feels like to an employee and to a customer, because they're so closely connected. Actually being there and experiencing that is just something that I just think you get the most value from.
Wow. So immerse, you know, you've immersed yourself, you know, you didn't just dip your toe in it, sat at head office, as you said, you jumped full into the pond, into the pool, and you really took the process on. And I guess by immersing yourself, you saw the things maybe from the driver's point of view, from the customer's point of view. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And from the store point of view as well. Yeah, it's it was really interesting to see the whole piece, how it all hung together, see the technical issues where something doesn't quite work properly, and how that would impact on the end customer or to someone at head office who's then got to reconcile everything. So being able to put it all together, it also really helped with making the changes. So when we go back and say, right, what have we discovered from this project? And we can get some sound bites from customers and employees and leaders. We can then explain what it means. What is it? Why are we saying that we want to change this piece of code? Well, because this impacts over here and this means this. And ultimately, we could lose customers because of it. It's that whole piece of why and being able to follow it through. That's a lot easier to be authentic about why you're changing something, or trying to ask someone to change something when it's their baby or it's their area. When you can really say and speak from, because you've seen it yourself, you get a lot more credibility from that, rather than just going, well, I heard it in a workshop, so I'll have to go and check why. You've seen it, and it's just so much easier to make change and transform a business if you can really understand the why and help articulate that why back to that person who needs to make the change.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, considering so many projects, particularly IT projects, seem to miss the mark of the original scope. I certainly think, if you could encourage people to take that approach a lot more, you'd get a lot more projects delivering first time. And, obviously you're writing in the new book, Customer Experience 2.
Yep.
Does your chapter follow the similar type of thinking that you've talked about today?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously talking about CX strategy and landing a strategy. One of the points that I pull out in there is ensuring accountability for end-to-end customer processes and across the different silos in a business, and really understanding what the pain points are on the front line, what the problems and the challenges are in the business, and not being blinkered by that. Because if you're writing a strategy, sometimes you're quite often remote from the end customer, and really getting in front of them and understanding what the challenges are is going to help you shape your strategy properly. So I kind of talk around following the baton, so following the paper trail, taking actual customers. So Mr. Singh, he calls up, what happens following that whole process, how many times he has to chase, what happens to his record, how does that get updated, and observing rather than going, right, in this department over here, this particular silo, what should happen. You actually seeing what happens end to end through all of the silos and watching where it could fall down, which is often that interlocking piece between the silos. And if you've got someone who's accountable for the full end to end of what happens to Mr. Singh all the way through, you're then going to make it a much easier and smoother and seamless, we love the word seamless, don't we, process for everyone involved, both the front facing employees and the end customer and the whole business, if you can take out inefficiencies, which often is those gaps in the middle where somebody will fall through and will struggle. So yeah, I think one of my main points is really being accountable for the whole process, or having someone very accountable for it and owning it, and then watching the whole process all the way through. Exactly, I mean, I talk about the rocket because I'm talking about space in my book, but kind of my chapter, but all of the gaps between the different segments that make up that rocket are exactly like what happens in a business. Quite often you have these barriers that are there, and trying to break them down, but you're all on the same mission, off you go together. That's the way I kind of want people to think about it. It's the end mission that's important, the end customer.
So that's really interesting what you're saying, because often what happens is when we, not just so much in the sales cycle, but certainly when we've got a problem, when we ring up a customer and we get passed from pillar to post, and then, sometimes things get dropped off. Often you hear about a customer who really liked the brand, loved the product, bought it, but they had a really minor problem, and that customer service, they got messed about so much because of that, they never go back. So following that baton through, I really like that concept. Is that something that you'd really talk about a lot in the book? Is it? Did you say in the chapter?
Yes, I definitely point to that in the chapter. Yeah, I think the unhappy path is often missed, especially when you're looking at the processes within your business and trying to make them more efficient. Quite often you forget the recovery side. You focus so much on the sales side and actually getting the customer on board and ticking the box, and yes, they've signed up with us now, this is great, we've got money coming in. But what happens when they can't log into the software and they ring up 3 times and then they can't get through to anyone and nobody wants to show them how the software works? Very quickly they go, oh, well, what was lovely and shiny and exciting and I thought I could use in my business? Yeah. So that whole process, following it through, following that baton all the way through, especially the unhappy path piece, is so crucial. And quite often unless you are someone who's in like a supervisor role where someone finally says, right, I need to escalate this to a supervisor, and then you get I've rung 4 times, I've emailed, I've tweeted. It's not until you hear that whole story at the end at maybe that level that you really realize, oof, some of our processes are not working. Yeah. So I think it is really watching all the way through and watching where it falls. Thank you.
I've got to ask you, because I know you live in Milton Keynes. I've worked in Milton Keynes a few times, and constantly you get stuck at the roundabouts. You know, I know you're a bit of a girl racer. How do you manage to live in Milton Keynes? Because you've got a roundabout every 100 yards, haven't you?
Oh, it is brilliant. I absolutely, yeah. I do love living in Milton Keynes, where there's barely any traffic and you can do 60, 70s on the road because that's the speed limit, and it's fantastic. Yeah, I did, I mentioned around the Argos assessment that I needed to do for the van. They did give me a bit of feedback to say, right, just remember that you've got massive 60-inch televisions in the back of your van, so you do actually need to slow down at the roundabouts. You're not in an M3 anymore. You can't just whiz over. You've got big customer TVs in the back there, so just slow down a little bit.
Take it easy. There's a race, not a racetrack, by the stadium. There's a go-karting track there, isn't it, in Milton Keynes?
There is. There's one about 2 miles away from me as well, go-karting track. And we've got Silverstone just up the road. Yeah, I do like a good track day.
Yeah, good. Well, look, it's been really good talking to you today, Sharon. People will no doubt read your chapter in the book and want to contact you. So what's the best way that they can contact you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Sharon Boyd CCXP. I am also all over Instagram and Twitter. Probably find me at CanoodleCX, or you can go onto my website, canoodlecx.com, or you can find me on any of the MKL ones as well, MKL Innovation. So either one, just come and find me. I'd love to hear from you.